Okay, let's get started. Today's 10-minute tour is Chicago's silent movies and the Civil War. So welcome to Chicago Movie Tours. I am Kelly. That is me there on the Mississippi River, and we are going to bridge the divide today between Chicago and Mississippi and connect those two states by talking about silent film. So as we do with every Chicago movie tour, our mission is to discover Chicago through film. So we are going to head from Chicago down south about a 12-hour drive to Vicksburg, Mississippi, or a 15-hour train ride if you ever want to take the Amtrak down there. And now that we have hit Vicksburg, we are going to go specifically to Vicksburg National Military Park, as you can see in the upper right-hand corner of this map. This is a map from the National Park Service of Vicksburg National Military Park. And as you can see, the park spans across the city of Vicksburg. It runs for about 16 miles, so it's quite a large military park. But we are only going to head to one section. So you can see the visitor center at the bottom right. We're going to go north about 2 miles to the Illinois Memorial, where that pin is dropped there. One of the most, if not the most, impressive state monuments in the entire park. So let's start our journey. So greeting us right before we get to the Illinois Memorial is General John A. Logan. And I point him out because he also has a statue in Grant Park in Chicago. So if you are familiar with the Chicago area, you have probably seen this statue. And if you're not, if you have watched a Netflix movie, Trial of the Chicago Seven, relatively recently, which is about the 1968 Democratic Convention, that statue is quite visible in the movie. All right, so let's say goodbye to General John A. Logan and make our way to this impressive monument of Illinois. So here it is, and it is modeled after the Roman Pantheon, and you can see the similarity in the Corinthian columns in both of these structures here. And the architecture, the construction, the adornment, the eagle at the top, for example, all of these things are either Chicago-based or Illinois-based. So as we're making our way around here and we're going to get out of the car and walk in here, let me recap really quickly the Siege of Vicksburg, because that is one major reason that this memorial is in this park. So the Siege of Vicksburg is one of the Union's longest and most successful Civil War campaigns. It would ultimately give the Union control of the Mississippi River. It lasted a long time, again, 47 days, and essentially what Grant did was starve the Confederate soldiers until they surrendered on July 4th of 1863. So let's get out and walk up here to the memorial. There are 47 steps on this memorial, one for each day of the Siege of Vicksburg. And we're going to pause here in this middle section and kind of glance up and see what we can see at the top of this structure. So obviously Illinois is written quite large there, but you also have that gold eagle and 3 women who are directly under it. So I want to point out the bronze bald eagle because it was sculpted by a man from Chicago, Frederick Hibbard, and he was paid a whopping $250 to design the eagle that would adorn the Illinois Memorial. So if you look directly down from that, the triangular area above the columns, there's 3 female figures there. One on the left and one on the right are representing North and South, and history is represented in the middle. So you can kind of see that the ones on the outside, North and South, are leaning into history a bit here, who is portrayed with some sort of pen or writing utensil as she records the deeds of North and South reunited in peace. So the Illinois Memorial here was dedicated on October the 26th, 1906. And the design of it was intended to build not only a grand and imposing commemorative structure worthy of Illinois, but a temple of fame as well. So let's walk in here and to see what this temple of fame looks like inside. So inside on the walls, you have 60 bronze tablets, and we're going to get back to those in just a second. But here's a quick pan around at some of the names of the colonels and brigadier generals and other men in charge of the Vicksburg campaign or the Siege of Vicksburg. All around the walls here inside the Illinois Memorial. So right above the wreath here, you can also see Illinois represented with Abraham Lincoln and Ulysses S. Grant. So if we move in a bit closer to this bronze portion, the third paragraph there reads that this is by the people of Illinois, free of malice, full of charity. They dedicate this monument as a memorial temple to enduring harmony and peace. So here's a closer look at those 60 bronze tablets that name over 36,000 soldiers from Illinois who participated in the Vicksburg campaign. And again, like the other names, they go all around the monument. On the floor here is the seal of the state of Illinois. You have an eagle, and in the eagle's beak is a banner with a state motto written on it, which is State Sovereignty, National Union. And there are 13 stars and stripes on the shield that it's holding by its feet, representing the original 13 states of the Union. And before we leave this structure, we might as well look up. So it's 62 feet high, and it cost $194,000 in 1906 to build this, all of which was paid for by the state of Illinois. And that translates, if calculations are correct, about $5.5 million today is what it would have cost. So as we're heading out the door here, I'm going to stop on this spot right here with all the valleys and peaks and hills in this battlefield, because it's going to hopefully lead us into our next part of this 10-minute tour, which is a movie that was filmed right out there called The Crisis in 1916. So there is a advertisement for The Crisis, but let's talk a little bit more about how this came to be. So in cinema's early days, there were major movie studios in Chicago. This is before Hollywood. And one of those was called Selig Polyscope Company, which is the one represented there on the right. So Selig Polyscope was a studio created by the man on the top left, William Selig, who was born and raised in Chicago. And over his career, Selig produced almost 1,000 movies through his companies in Chicago and then ultimately out in Los Angeles. But Selig is also kind of well known for the zoo that he opened in LA. And one of the MGM lion mascots lived at Selig Zoo. She's pictured here in this image of the opening of MGM's production of The Wizard of Oz in 1939. So you are probably at least tangentially familiar with Selig because of that. So he's making pictures, and in 1915, this movie, Birth of a Nation, was released. It was wildly successful, really long at 3 hours, and as you can see from the promotional poster, deeply racist. But we'll save that for another tour. So William Selig wanted to capitalize on the success of The Birth of a Nation and its action-packed sequences like you're seeing over here with the burning of Atlanta, and the really nice camera work where you're seeing with these men go off to war, and the camera nicely pans over to the left where the women and children are left behind. So he wanted to capitalize on the success of this movie. In 1916 then, he produced a silent Civil War movie called The Crisis, and it was filmed partly on location where we are touring today in Vicksburg. So this is an article from Motion Picture News in 1916 that is completely about the movie The Crisis, as you can see at the top there. This movie inspires patriotism, the subheading reads. So look at the highlighted section. Entire State Guard engaged for crisis filmed by Selig. And I've blown this up a little bit for you here. And the subheading here, scenes taken at Vicksburg, Mississippi, right on historic ground of Story. So this movie was filmed right there in that battlefield that we were looking at in Vicksburg, Mississippi. So here's a little bit from the movie, which fortunately exists. Again, about 70% of silent movies are no longer with us. So this one ran about 90 minutes in length. It was about two families, one from the north and one from the south, and their friendship was what was tested by the war. Now, I'm not showing you any part of that because that was what was not necessarily filmed where we're touring today. But these scenes here, all of the battle scenes, were shot at the Vicksburg National Military Park, where we've been looking at today. So let's take one more look around the Illinois section of Vicksburg's National Military Park before we head out of here. We can check out those valleys and peaks and all that land there. And I can give you a couple more notes about the Chicago-based silent movie, The Crisis, one of which is that in addition to its story about the two families that were separated in the North and South, The Crisis is also considered a sympathetic portrayal of abolitionism and Lincoln's efforts to reunify the country. As such, The Crisis did pretty well in theaters, but because the United States was entering World War I just a few months after it was released, moviegoers kind of dropped off. In other words, they weren't really interested in another war film, especially when they were about to embark on a war themselves. So that does it for Chicago's silent movies and the Civil War. I will see you back here next time for another 10-minute tour.